And good evening, everybody. That's me, Corentin Guillo. I'm a Scottish space entrepreneur. I would say, don't believe my accent, but trust me, I'm a Scottish space entrepreneur. Space entrepreneurship. These two words were never meant to be together. Even a few years ago, very few people talked about space entrepreneurship. Space and entrepreneurship are two very rare beasts that very few people were courageous or maybe crazy enough to chase up. But today, it's completely different. We can all be potentially a space entrepreneur. And this is why I'm going to explain how it works. So let's focus first on the first side of this equation, which is space. Why space is the place to start your business today? This is basically because you've got three main technology trends which are getting mature and which are coming together, and they make things possible now. The first trend is something we call new space, which could be related to big data from space. The second trend is cloud solutions. And the third trend, as we've heard, is about artificial intelligence. Let's look at first new space. The best way to understand what new space is obviously to look at what is old space. So old space is basically this organization, multinational organization, which in the past have been developing massive, very expensive spacecraft. They've been backed up by government for decades, and it took years to develop a spacecraft and then to launch it and to operate it. And the result is that once this spacecraft is in space, it will produce a very little amount of data because of the cost and the few numbers they are. If you look at new space now, in opposition, it's a new start of companies, quite often startups, which have raised private investment and which have started to leverage other technology, like your iPhone or your tablet or your laptop. They've also started to access space at much lower cost by piggybacking on the big spacecraft. And the result of this new space startup is that for the price of one big spacecraft, you can build dozens, hundreds of these smaller spacecraft. When you look at the data, once you've got these dozens or hundreds of spacecraft in space, what it gives you is what we call revisit. The revisit is about passing on a regular basis over a location and again and again and again. Okay? So let's look at this from a very concrete example. Okay? The image you've got there on the left is what we call an old space image. This is a huge image. You know, the minimum size would be 10 kilometers by 10 kilometers. The level of details contained in this image are amazing. We are looking at details around 30 centimeters for the best of this image. Okay? The image you've got at the bottom right is an image from a new spacecraft, much smaller, much more blurry, not very accurate, you know. So now let's think about this. I'm a commodity trader. So for people who do not know what is a commodity trader, it's basically somebody who is selling and buying some commodity like grains and making out of this. And they do this with speculation. And better they are at speculating, more money they will make. Now, as a commodity trader, I'm interested to monitor the movement of barges on the Mississippi. The reason is that these barges, or the containers, they contain grain. And if I can monitor on a regular basis these barges on the Mississippi going south to the Gulf of Mexico, I can potentially predict how much grain will be exported from the US at the end of the month. If I wanted to use satellite imagery from the old space and get this image where I can, identify very clearly one specific barge, I might have an image every month, every 3 months, best case scenario. If I get an image from this new space, what I can get is an image every week, every day, and very soon every hours. And this is really what the value of new space is. It's about giving much greater revisit time over locations. So we can all now monitor, fast-moving assets and very regular and rapid changes. Cloud solutions. Everybody knows what the cloud is? When stuff are happening, now you don't really know why it's happening. It's happening in the cloud. More seriously, cloud infrastructure are a set of computers which offer huge processing, storage, and network capabilities. They've first been developed by major IT companies like Google and Amazon, just to name them. name them. And then very recently, what these companies have done is they started to open access to this infrastructure for third party. That's what we call infrastructure as a service. The benefit for accessing this infrastructure now is you don't have anymore to buy yourself your computer. You don't have anymore to invest into this cost. What you can do is you can go straight away to this company, rent the access to their infrastructure, and then you can use them, and then you give them back. If you look at this from a startup perspective, it brings a unique asset. Let's take the example of this startup, which is based in the US. It's called Descartes Labs. Descartes Labs, a few years ago, wanted to process a huge volume of data, 1 petabyte of data, 4 quadrillion pixels of satellite imagery and corn production data, to see if they can identify better what they can do in terms of corn yield production. If they had to buy their own infrastructure, that would have cost, huge budget for them, and moreover, the startup, you don't have this funding. The time it would have taken to develop this infrastructure would have been enormous. So what they did is basically they go back to Google and made a partnership. And by accessing Google infrastructure as a service, they processed all this imagery, 11 years of image archive, in less than 16 hours. The result? They've been able to predict more accurately and much quicker the corn yield production in the US than the US Department of Agriculture. Product market fit. This is exactly what this startup needed. Then they've been able to raise more investment, and today they are creating a big data factory from space, which has the objective to monitor the world on a daily basis. Third major technology trends which is coming together, artificial intelligence. We've all heard about artificial intelligence. The way I will summarize artificial intelligence, I will call this a smart process which has the capability to learn from and to predict on data. The way we use artificial intelligence in imagery is by identifying and counting objects. But we have to do this at scale, better and faster than trained human eyes. Let's look at this into perspective. When you apply artificial intelligence to satellite imagery, you can start to identify very small objects into huge pictures. You can count cars, you can count boats, or habitations, or boats, I said boats, and the plane. But when you place this into a much greater perspective, and you look at this from the map you've got in the middle, okay? This map, in fact, is a population density map of an area in South Africa. Okay? Facebook, a few years ago, they wanted to bring internet to the world, and they needed to understand where are the globally unconnected. When they went to the World Bank, this is the map they've been given. What can you do with this map? So what Facebook did, basically, is they developed some artificial intelligence technology which they've applied onto huge volume of satellite imagery to identify every single habitation in the country. And they've done this at a level of granularity which is huge. But the benefits, obviously, for Facebook are much greater when you bring this to the perspective. Just think about having access to this data for the census, for household or for vaccination campaign. And that's really what this machine learning or artificial intelligence is bringing now to this sector. So let's summarize. Why space is the best place to start your business? There is no more barrier. You've got access to big data from space. You've got access to infrastructure as a service. This is commodity now. And now artificial intelligence is getting open source. What we can do now is we can start to develop, these barriers have been lower. We can start to develop new applications and new services and start to engage and create new market opportunities. So let's look at the second side, at the other side of this space entrepreneurship equation. Let's look at entrepreneur. What does it take to be an entrepreneur? The three major ingredients that you need into your entrepreneurship recipe are obviously the team, the idea, and the market. Let's look at the team. I'm pretty sure that some of you have heard that it's super important to create a great team of founders. And this is true. You will need to bring people on board that have better knowledge than you of the technology or the market, for instance. I'm the first one to say, as an entrepreneur, I'm not building a business. I'm building the team which is building the business. But there is something that not that many people tell you. in the same way that it is very important to bring great talent on board of your business, it is important to know when is the good time to let them go. Because when you will progress your business, you will face some challenge. You will have to take some big leap of faith. You will have to make some investments. You will have to work hard. And what you will see is that not everybody is ready to do this type of commitment. Some of them will just piggyback on your success, and they are the worst. So it's really important to know how to build a team, but it's super important to know when to let go of these guys, because they will slow down your progress and sometimes will jeopardize the success of your business. The idea. Quite often we think that the idea is the most important of the business. And in fact, this is completely the opposite. The idea counts almost for nothing. Still good to have a good idea of what you want to do with your business, but what really matters is what we call the customer pain. What you have to do is you have to talk to users, you have to talk to individuals, to businesses, and start to understand their problem. Once you've understood their problem, you have to look at the source and then find a way to address this. Then you've got an idea. Then, from this idea, you will develop a concept, which you will test again with users, with customers. This concept will be developed further into a prototype, into a minimum viable product, which again, you bring in front of customers or users to see how it works, and it will end up as being a product bought by a paying customer, because a business doesn't exist without a paying customer. Once you've got your first paying customer, you do it again, and you've got a second paying customer, and again, and again. And you end up by having a market. But here again, it's difficult because if you've got a very few number of customers, you end up into a niche market. And it's very difficult to get out of a too small niche market. But in the same way, if you go too big, you cannot address this market because you don't have enough focus on what you have to do. So the market, what we call the beachhead market, is the first market you need to address and is the most difficult to find. Because you need to position yourself as a nice-to-have feature, helping them to reduce their cost, and even increasing their revenue. At this stage, then, you can scale up your business, and you can potentially be a successful entrepreneur. So let's summarize a second time. Technology is there, between the data, the computing, and the machine learning. You might already think about friends or colleagues to start to create a funding team, okay? You've got an idea, and there is a huge untapped market there waiting for you. We've got most of the ingredients to create these space entrepreneurship ventures. But we are missing the most fundamental ingredient into this recipe. This is about execution. You will have to execute. And executing is more than 50% of the success of a startup. And I would say tough luck, guys, because there is no blog, there is no book, there is no TED Talk about executing. Okay? You have to do this yourself. What I'm going to tell you is I'm going to tell you a bit of my story and when I feel that sometimes I had to execute and make important decisions. So I started my career a bit more than a decade ago in the space industry in France. And I was one of these very lucky people working with satellite imagery. Very quickly, I understood the value of this imagery and that you can start to develop new applications and services. And I started to kind of scratch a new market there. My manager at the time really felt that there was some potential there. So I was promoted a manager. Being a manager in France is a great stuff. Great recognition. You've got your office, you approve timesheets, you authorize holidays, you do forecast and reporting for your managers, who do forecast and reporting for their own managers. No, I don't want to be a manager. I wanted to be a leader, I wanted to bring people together from different cultures, from different skills and experience. I wanted to inspire and lead them to outperform and execute. And the French culture was not good at the time. So I decided to pack up and go to UK. And I landed in Portsmouth in south of England. Then I had the opportunity to develop further my idea into a concept. And then even into a vision and a mission to the point that I had even a strategy on the table. I went again in front of my manager, presented my strategy, hoping to get some good feedback and maybe some funding to start to implement it. And you know what they told me? This is crystal ball gazing. Seriously? Guys, I told you that, between the cloud, the new space, the machine learning, this is going to be big. And what you tell me is crystal ball gazing? Well, you've got funding, you've got the talent, you've got the best satellite in the world. No, I was not ready to accept, this at this stage. So what I did is I navigated through the organization, and I decided to tap at the highest level. Director of strategy. If this guy doesn't get it, then I don't know what I'm going to do. So I managed to get a 15-minute time slot with this director of strategy. Very stressful. I get ready, get my suit, the tie, get my keynote, which I rehearsed, get my content ready, and I was going to this event. I made, my 15 minutes perfect keynote. I would have never made such a performance. And then at the end, I looked at the manager. He looked at me in the eyes, and he said, I like people like you. I like people thinking out of the box. Thinking out of the box. Guys, when you've been into corporation or industry, and you've got your manager that look at you and say, I like you because you think out of the box, you know that whatever he will say after this, it will not count. This is just some beautiful management bullshit. So at this stage, I already thought about the next steps. I was completely disengaged. And you know what I've done? I decided to get out of the office. Getting out of the office is maybe the most important, because you stop talking to yourself. You stop making your own hypotheses. What I did is I went into the street, I talked to people, to individuals, to businesses, understand why they were using Google Maps, what was really important for them to make decisions. And I started to identify some problems. Even an idea came out of this. From this idea, I thought that I could create a much greater market opportunity if we are going to unlock access to all this imagery. So I decided to move to Scotland and create a team. This team now is building a business. They are fantastic talent from all over the world, and all together, they are starting to build a business with paying customers, and we are now starting to create a new marketplace for satellite imagery. We are creating the mass market. So if you have to retain something today, this is this. Get out of the office. If you don't feel you are a manager, but you want to be a great inspirational leader, if you don't trust crystal balls, but you've got a crispy vision, if you don't accept anymore the management bullshit, like crystal ball gazing, this is you. This is your chance. Get out of the office and become a space entrepreneur. Thank you.